Welcome to Type Tune Tint. I'm Tom Kranz. You're listening to the cutting edge of improvisational music by two master musicians based in Seattle, Don Berman and Dick Valentine. Today I'll explore this music and its popularity with a special look at a specific instrument you probably haven't seen very often. And I'm joined now by these two giants of music in the Seattle area, Dick Valentine and Don Berman. Dick and Don are the collaborators on the piece that you just heard a little bit of as we opened this particular episode. It's a piece called Mendacity. They performed it during a jazz festival that happened last year, which we'll talk a little bit about that. These two guys, first of all, welcome. It's good to see you, and I'm sure it's good to be seen as well. When did you guys start playing together and collaborating? I guess when did you basically discover each other? You've been in Seattle, both of you, for decades, and then suddenly you're playing together a lot. How did that happen? Dick, you first.
Yeah, so as I recall, I met Don when a group I was working with did a free oriented kind of experimental music presentation at a collective gallery called collective art presentation space called Gallery 1412 here in Seattle. And I had a group at that time that was kind of the remnants of a improvisation workshop that the great Alistair Hood had conducted here in Seattle between '86 and '03. And then those of us who were in the workshop had continued to meet after Al passed away, because where else we were going to play music like that and pursue the goals that we were pursuing. So we were doing that. And Donnie, as I recall, was playing with Kenny Mandel's Ronan group.
Yeah, so we were both on the same bill, so to speak.
Right. So the two of us, the two groups, came together to do an evening presentation where, my group presented a set and Donnie's group presented a set, and then the seven or so of us joined forces and did some group improv, all totally free.
What year are we talking here? How long ago was this?
What was that, Dick?
I would peg that right around maybe 11, maybe 12, 2011, 2012.
Yeah. Okay, so this,
a little bit later.
So you guys have been playing together for, that's like a dozen years or so?
Yeah, we've known
something like that.
Okay. All right. And so Don, you what brought you guys kind of both now have this improv thing going on? I guess you were both playing improv music before. Oh, yeah. What made you kind of go off into this direction? Was it the two of you together, or did you have that interest to begin with anyway?
We both had interest in stuff besides straight ahead and free jazz. I had met a woman who was in the belly dancing, Middle Eastern percussion 20 years ago. She turned me on to doumbeks and Middle Eastern percussion. And I had some tabla lessons. And I was a percussion major in college. So I kind of had an interest not just to only play drum set forever. And I think on the parallel road, Dick was accumulating and studying world flutes from a number of different countries. And as I recall it, we decided it'd be very easy to do a duo instead of some of the larger groups we tried to organize and get rehearsals for. And then COVID came along, and we sneaked over to Dick's house when we weren't supposed to and hung out in the same room, did many a Sunday. And it was really, of course, it was great to get out of the house, and to make music was a bonus.
For myself, I had an interest in creating music since I ever became aware of the Art Ensemble of Chicago.
Okay.
I was pretty young when I found out about them, and I saw those guys, especially Joseph Jarman and Roscoe Mitchell, standing at the front of this stage with this trumpeter in a white coat. And Lester is standing there, lonely with his trumpet, and these two woodwind guys are just surrounded by, every blowable thing that you can imagine, plus synthesizers and little toys, and, Malachi in the back with his bullhorn and his little toys, Famadou Don Moye with a massive rack of, percussion stuff. and and all the face paint and the costumes and the presentation and the styling of what they were doing as great black music, which just had so much aesthetic and historical resonance.
Art Ensemble of Chicago, that was a group that when I was a jazz DJ in college, I played it once in a while, and then I got a lot of people sticking their head into my studio and saying, "What is that? Don't play as much of that. Play more of this," because nobody gets that music.
Yeah,
But Don, who are like of that ilk music, Don? Who are the like the drummer or drummers who you looked at and who you heard as maybe an influence in that?
Well, another common person that Dick and I both had was this guy named Al Hood. And at the end of the 20th century, I started hanging out at his house on Tuesday nights. He had an improv class. And it was new for me to get away from straight ahead playing into more free improv. And he said, "You need to start listening to Ed Blackwell, who did a lot of work with Ornette Coleman and so forth." And he said, "Listen to Barry Altschul, who did a lot of work with Dave Holland and Anthony Braxton and Chick Corea." And these guys were a little bit more different ilk than the guys I'd been listening to, who were more like Art Blakey and Philly Joe Jones and, those great straight ahead drummers and Elvin Jones. And so I started widening my range of things I was listening to, and I started playing free jazz. You could have called that, because it was jazz. It was a free improv type of thing. And I was a true Gemini because I liked playing the straight ahead, like your guys told you to play more of at your station. And I also liked doing the free stuff. And then I also had this world music thing going on, like a third interest.
Getting back to the song that the music that we opened with here, composition called Mendacity. And this was something that you guys put together for this Earshot jazz festival that comes around every year in Seattle, correct?
Right, the yearly thing they do.
So would you say that that piece that little chunk that we saw, and I'm going to play more of it in just a minute, is that, do you guys play from music? How do you approach coordinating a tune like that?
We are trying to tell stories. We're musicians, we're artists. We feel like we have something to say about the society we live in, the world that's around us, the experiences that we're having. So Don has done scores that don't involve Italian notation, big dots on lined paper, for a lot of different things. Before we started running the show here, we were talking about his piece, Ascension Northwest, which was designed exactly that way. Well, almost exactly that way. There are motifs that were provided on paper in regular notation to everybody. They're very short. Each one is maybe a little melodic nugget or a rhythmic idea or a combination there, and so and then there was an order in which the soloists were going to work, and Don chopped it up so that each soloist would be backed by a different sort of sub-ensemble, so that the sound would evolve over the course of the presentation, right? So everyone had something to read. Everyone knew what they were given instructions, what they were supposed to do, which was to develop this little musical nugget, and then the next person whose solo it was would emerge out of this and be joined by whatever part of the group there was. So
as you're describing this, I'm showing some of the video of that, and you can see everybody has a music stand.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, what you're saying is that there's not like a complete, what's the word I'm looking? There's not like a complete score or chart of the piece, correct?
There's a complete score. It's just that not all of it is in Italian notation. Some of it is in plain English words.
For the wider audience out there, Ascension is the name of a composition by John Coltrane that became an album called Ascension on Impulse Records. And it was recorded in 1964, right here in freaking New Jersey, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And it was seen as really, at that time, I guess Coltrane was moving his music was being described as a little more restless. He had been, making the quartet scene with McCoy Tyner and I guess Jimmy Garrison and Elvin, and
Right.
had recorded a number of really successful albums, including A Love Supreme. But he seemed like he wanted to do more. He wanted to break out. He wanted to tell a different story. A lot of it, I think, was inspired by his belief in God and his faith. And so he wrote this piece, Ascension. And I remember reading, I think that Albert Eiler, who's a sax player of a kind of the free jazz, for lack of
Right.
a better term, idiom, he was an influence for him. And Albert Eiler, much the way you just described it, Dick, he did motifs. He handed out to all the different, or suggested to the different members of the group. I think there were 11 or 12 musicians. Each one had their own little, it was like a mini set of instructions, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And that sounds like pretty much what you did when you did your version of Ascension, Don, which was performed in 2017 as an homage to Coltrane, I guess, right? Wasn't it for his 90th birthday?
Yeah, what happened is I was driving in my car and I had the radio on, and it was actually, I think, 2016.
Okay.
And they said, hey, it's going to be Coltrane's 90th birthday this year. And a little light bulb went on my head. I said, I got to do something about that. Well, it took till 2017. And I thought it'd be fun to write a piece of my own, inspired, you could say inspired by Ascension.
Okay.
And I used similar instrumentation, but I had about 15 different motifs in there that were improvised on by the whole group. And the tutti sections, meaning where everybody played, were sandwiched between them, like Dick said, was a solo opportunity for each member of the band.
Right. And I did notice that when I watched the video, they're almost like taking turns. And then there are some times when you're leading and you're cueing them kind of, right? You're saying you're giving them cues.
That section's over. It's time to bring the whole group back in. And then I varied the orchestration. So if you were one of, let's say, I think one of the solos was just unaccompanied, like a cappella.
Right.
Another one was maybe just with bass and trumpet, and another one would have drums and bass. And so each solo was by a different instrument and had a different group of instruments accompanying that solo. So there was a lot of variety, and then the whole band would come back in like a wave with the next motif. And so most of the notes you heard were not written down, but the motifs on which the ensemble sections improvised were written down.
I see. And Dick, I saw you playing. You're on the left side of the frame there. You sounding very Coltrane-esque in a couple places there. And in fact, I kind of said, "Wow, what he doing there?" And so you wrote this piece, but you called it Ascension Northwest, or was that the name of the event?
I called it Ascension Northwest because it was inspired by Coltrane's Ascension. And it was done by Northwest musicians with a whole different set of, it was a different piece. And so it was a Northwest tribute to Coltrane and his birthday.
I'm going to show the folks a little bit of that right now. And then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about Mendacity, which is your most recent, I guess, epic or opus epic. So here's a little bit more of Ascension Northwest, folks. This was from back in 2017, an homage to John Coltrane. And that became a CD, correct, Don?
Yes.
Which
Yes,
I have somewhere.
Right. It became a CD, and it's going to be picked up by a friend of mine's label called Right Brain Records, and so it'll be
Oh,
on.
is that right?
What?
You didn't
What's
tell
that?
me that, Don. Congratulations.
It's a new development. New
Yeah.
development.
It's
Yeah.
a nude
great.
development. No
Just
nude
this
developments, please. This is a family podcast.
Yeah, just this week, and so it's in the project stage. But yeah, to add that particular piece and CD, all the money we made from that, we're giving, which is a ton. That's how Dickie have got that new T-shirt, and I got this one. We gave the money to a Seattle organization that protects battered women.
Excellent. That's great. So I want to move again and talk a little bit about Mendacity now. This is a really lovely video. I mentioned this when I first saw it. It's beautifully recorded. The sound is great. The colors are cool. It looks like the guy who shot it used 2 or 3 cameras. I mean, he took some care here.
Oh, yeah.
And he shot it and he edited it, I understand, and he did a great job. This is also an example of performing from essentially an outline as opposed to a note-by-note score, correct?
That's exactly right.
Conceptual art.
Without further ado, I want to play a little more of Mendacity now. This is
Okay.
Dick Valentine on, I guess, tenor sax.
Baritone sax.
Baritone sax, my apologies, and Don on drum set. And we're going to play some of this. We're going to come out. I'm going to do some shameless self-promotion for one of my books. And then when we come back, we're going to show a little bit of an impromptu concert at a small coffee/bookshop in Seattle, in which Dick plays this massive horn called a contrabass clarinet. We're going to show you that, and then we're going to talk about that instrument. So here's Mendacity, and then we'll be back. And that, folks, is Dick Valentine on the contrabass clarinet and Don Berman playing drums at a little club slash, well, it's a coffee shop, bookshop in Seattle called Huth Buzzard. I've actually been there. And it's a place where, you know, musicians gather. I guess they play for free, or maybe you play for a cup of coffee. I don't know. But you can always find somebody playing there while you browse the bookshelves. And, you know, Dick, I don't know a whole lot about playing wind instruments, but it looks like this particular wind instrument requires a lot of wind to play. Tell me a little bit about playing the contrabass clarinet. What's that like?
The contrabass clarinet is a clarinet, and it works the same as all other clarinets. It fingers the same. It's keyed in or pitched in B flat. It's a transposing instrument. And it's just a really long tube of air. Cylindrical bore about that big around from the mouthpiece to just where the bell starts to flare. This is it right here behind me, staying out of trouble in my office here. And I stand the thing in front of me about 2.5 feet. It stands there on its peg. I grasp it by its keys and I blow into it. The horn holds itself up, so I'm not expending energy trying to, you know, maintain the horn in a position or hold its weight or anything. I'm just, you know, I just move my fingers on the keys, right. And then, yes, I have to breathe into it enough to activate the reed, which once it's going, it's kind of going. It does take a lot of support to play, which is not exactly the same thing as blowing a lot of air into something. Okay. It's physically pretty demanding, and also just really massively fun to play.
Don, is there any, when you're playing with him on that horn, is there anything that you need to do different, or is there any way you play? Do you play different drums? Do you play at a lower register? Is there anything you do differently?
Well, the low notes on that thing are really low. and there is a capability to play more high notes and in the middle range. So what I try and do at various points is vary the frequencies that I'm playing on the drum set, because the drum set has a number from low to high frequencies. So I have some awareness of the frequencies. I might do a contrast. If he's real low, I might play real high, and you get a cool gap between the two. Or sometimes you do them together. But I'm aware of frequencies.
Right.
Yeah. It's cool to watch for sure.
On that point,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but at the risk of giving Don a big head, one of the things that I noticed about Don, even that first time that we played together that I mentioned at the 1412 Gallery, and something that I have valued about his playing ever since, is that among drummers that I've known, among drummers that I know and I'm aware of here in the Puget Sound, Don has this quality that he plays in a way that lets me know that he cares about the sound that his stroke is making when he hits a drum or a cymbal, or when he hits something. I can tell that he cares what that sound is going to be. And I can't say that about every drummer I've ever heard.
That sounds like a function of a good listener, really. I mean, he's listening to what you're doing.
Thanks, Dick. What I wanted to say as far as reception of the more free jazz we play, Seattle is great because there's all kinds of music here. It's a very small demographic that likes the free stuff like we're playing. I mean, nationally, if you look at record sales, I think jazz is 1% of the 100% of record sales. And so if you look at that 1% and then you go, let's divide that into the stuff that people like smooth jazz and straight ahead jazz and swing era jazz. We're a very esoteric demographic playing the free stuff that we play. Now, Seattle's a good size jazz scene, but there's always, anywhere in jazz, there's more players than there are gigs. The supply of players exceeds the demand. You also get together and play with people without regard for the industry because you want to play. Like some societies, they have music in the society. Nobody even does it for a living. It's just part of the culture.
It's physically very satisfying to play an acoustic instrument, and always has been to me. There's very sensual, tactile aspect of the experience, but plus the sound, right? Which I love. I mean, I play saxophone because I like the way that thing sounds when I play it, right? At the same time, yeah, I feel like I have a story to tell. I think I'm a pretty darn good improviser as far as it goes, and I think that my music is worth hearing. So, I'm out there and I'm thinking, if there's people in the room, I want them to understand and respond to what I'm doing.
It's one thing that's apparent by watching the video of your concerts here, which is that music is a part of the fabric of both of you guys. Dick, you talk about the visceral joy of doing it. Don, I can see it in your face too. When you're playing, the feel of the sticks and the impact of the sticks on the cymbal and everything. I think that, any real musician feels the same way, like it's part of who you are and it makes up, part of the person you are. Dick Valentine and Don Berman, I want to thank you guys for joining me from your palatial estates in Seattle, Washington. You guys are giants. I'll be watching you. I really appreciate you joining me, and we'll go out with a little more of Dick and Don playing at the Couth Buzzard in Seattle. Gentlemen, au revoir.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a real pleasure.